Okay. Um, all right. Welcome, Denver. Welcome, Emir. This is a kind of experiment for Football Makes History to try to see if we can have an interesting conversation for the people who follow us. And today, Denver Charles, I'm never going to call you Denver Charles again. I'm just going to call you Denver, of course. History teacher in Belfast and chairman of the History Teachers Association of Northern Ireland, and involved with Football Makes History. And Emir Filipovic, associate professor of medieval history at University of Sarajevo, and an all-round football fan. I guess that's both of you. So the idea to have this conversation is because next Thursday, Northern Ireland is playing Bosnia-Herzegovina to qualify, and in the playoff to qualify for the Euros, which should have been held in 2020, but will be in June 2021. The idea, it's not an ordinary football match, and those are not two ordinary countries that are represented on the pitch coming Thursday. So this conversation we want to have to just hear and get some perspective about what the significance is of football in those two societies. Why are these societies not, let's say, ordinary? What's the story? And maybe to have a bit of a conversation whether football actually is an opportunity for peace or for cohabitation or coexistence or those kind of things. But let's start with the basics. Denver, could you give a bird's eye view of what Northern Ireland is and how it is divided?
Well, I mean, Northern Ireland is a country that came out of conflict over 20 years ago now. And that conflict, in its nature, was a sectarian conflict between, loosely speaking, Protestants and Catholics. And there was a lot of violence between 1968 and 1998. And thankfully, the peace process kicked in, and that was brought to an end. And we're pretty much living in a very peaceful society now. That's as bird's eye as you get, I would
say. Emir?
I'll try to sum it up as best as I can. Bosnia-Herzegovina is a relatively modern country that has been a part of the former Socialist Federative Republic of Yugoslavia. When the Berlin Wall came down and communism ended in Europe, that also had repercussions on Yugoslavia as well. Yugoslavia broke up in what was a very bloody conflict. Yugoslavia was in fact made up of 6 republics. Bosnia and Herzegovina was one of these republics. And without wanting to go too much into particulars, the war in Bosnia and Herzegovina broke out in 1992 and ended in 1995 with the signing of the Dayton Peace Accord between what were basically 3 sides that were involved in the war. These were the Catholic Croats, the Muslim Bosniaks, and the Orthodox Christian Serbs. After the signing of the peace agreement, the 3-year conflict was very, very bloody and very, very difficult. It involved ethnic cleansing, which is a euphemism that has been quite associated with Bosnia and Herzegovina and war in Bosnia and Herzegovina, but also genocide and destruction of cultural heritage and mass rape, mass executions, and so on. After 1995, it has been peaceful, but the peace has been very, very uneasy. The country has remained divided in its core. So we still have these 3 constituent peoples that make up Bosnia and Herzegovina, really pulling each in their own direction. So there's not much of a cohesion, there's not much of a unity. And if I could just explain it with 2 words, Bosnia and Herzegovina is a country only in a name and on paper. In fact, it is made up of 3 ethno-nationalist groups or ethno-national groups that make it up, that make Bosnia and Herzegovina up.
So if it is united or it is a country only on paper, to what extent is it a country on the football field?
Well, this is very, very interesting because Bosnia and Herzegovina has been recognized as a state very early on by the international community. And also UEFA and FIFA had been very proactive early on in supporting newly established countries or countries that has recently gained independence. Kosovo is a prime example, despite of its involvement in international organization being disputed by Serbia, that thinks that Kosovo is still a part of Serbia. UEFA and FIFA were very quick to recognize it. This was also the case with Bosnia and Herzegovina. Both of the crown organizations of European and world football were very quick to dismiss any other football associations within Bosnia and Herzegovina that would have had any tendencies for pursuing an independent line within Bosnia and Herzegovina, because Bosnia and Herzegovina is made up of two entities. This is the Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina and Republic of Srpska. Republic of Srpska, as far as I know, has its own football association, which organizes football within this entity or part of Bosnia and Herzegovina, but is in fact not recognized either by UEFA or FIFA as a standalone member with its own national team being able to compete in these countries. So the fact that Bosnia and Herzegovina is a country is also reflected in the fact that it has a national team, but the national team is not supported equally by all of the inhabitants of Bosnia and Herzegovina. So this is where we come down to the fact that in Bosnia and Herzegovina, all of these three groups pull each in their own directions, especially regarding football. And I don't know if this is something that we're going to talk about a little later on, because a lot of the people in Bosnia and Herzegovina tend to identify, the Serbs in Bosnia and Herzegovina identify with the Serbian national team, and they support the Serbian national team in major competitions. And a lot of the Croats in Bosnia and Herzegovina support Croatia in international competitions. And in fact, it's been quite famous, a statement by the current member of the three-headed presidency of Bosnia and Herzegovina, who is a Serb, and he claimed publicly or stated publicly that he would never support the national team, the national football team of Bosnia and Herzegovina, only in the case if it played against Turkey. Then he might support Bosnia and Herzegovina, because he does not like Turkey because of the, let's say, historical heritage and the relations between the Ottoman Empire and Turkey with the Serbian people.
I mean, there's definitely more to unpick there, but just to catch on the not supported equally statement, if we throw it over again to Northern Ireland, which of course, as maybe you could say a couple of things, Denver, about how long, what's the longer history of the Football Association in your country, and then maybe also something about what it has meant when people supported it, and we're going to go later to see into what it means now and hopefully what it means in the future, but some context there might be helpful.
So basically it's a very, very old association, very similar to other stories that you would get in England. So the Irish Football Association was set up in the 1880, and the story begins there and goes right through. It's funny, actually, little clubs are set up in and around Belfast. There are clubs that are set up in the rural areas of Northern Ireland, but football really takes off, as it does in England and other places. And really what happens is the Irish Football Association is the Football Association of Ireland up until partition happens. And then what you have when partition happens is the Irish Football Association continues, but they're trying to work out what's going to happen in the Republic of Ireland. At that time, it was independent Ireland. What sort of football association are they going to have? And actually, football wasn't a game that they wanted to promote in the Republic of Ireland initially, because they wanted to promote Gaelic games. And for about 20 or 30 years, you had the curious situation that arose where you had players playing for Northern Ireland and Ireland, a form of the Irish team, because there was no formal Northern Ireland, Southern Ireland. It was just two Irelands, if you like. And so you had a player that could play in a match in Dublin, and then he could come up and play in another match in Belfast, all in the same weekend. So it was a very kind of curious situation up until the 1950s. But in the 1950s to 70s, of course, Northern Ireland eventually became Northern Ireland, and the Republic of Ireland team got established. But the curious thing is, as with everything in Northern Ireland, the division is a division of allegiance. So within Northern Ireland, you would have, roughly speaking, 40% of the population that would have an allegiance to Dublin, maybe 40% of the population that would have an allegiance to the United Kingdom. And that's the way the football is divided as well. So 40% would have perhaps eventually turned towards supporting the Republic of Ireland. And then obviously those in Northern Ireland, the other 40% would have supported Northern Ireland. Now that wasn't really a big deal, believe it or not, because Northern Ireland had a very good team in the early 1980s. And I would say that everybody supported the Northern Ireland team whenever they were doing well and getting into World Cups. But the Republic of Ireland got a very good team under Jack Charlton in the late 1980s. And I would say the division of allegiance started to become very apparent whenever the Republic of Ireland started to get a very, very good team. So it was really, let's support the Republic of Ireland, Jack Charlton, brilliant team. Now they're going to the World Cup. And I would say from that moment on, you would be a Republic of Ireland fan if you had a particular political allegiance. You'd be a Northern Ireland fan if you had a particular political allegiance. And that coincides with a very bleak period in Northern Ireland's history and Northern Ireland, basically the fan story in Northern Ireland, which I can go on to if you want.
Well, maybe before that, because I think that's an interesting thing to say. Like, I mean, you touch on, for example, it's easier to support a team when they're successful, right? And then it becomes more of a public thing rather than a hardcore sort of fan thing. But also, Emir, does success, so the Bosnian national team exists also since somewhere soon after 95, 96, 98, somewhere around that?
In fact, the establishment of the Football Association was soon after Bosnia-Herzegovina proclaimed independence. So it was 1992-93. The first football matches that the national team played were in very difficult circumstances because these were just some of the players who played in European clubs who proclaimed their allegiance to Bosnia and Herzegovina, and they decided that they would play. But then it was a very gradual process after 95, after the war. In 96, Bosnia and Herzegovina took no part in the European qualifications for Euro 96. But the first qualification process was for the World Championship in France in 1998. And ever since then, the Football Association and the national team have been gradually growing together. Has been a much more a professional approach in both. We have had some really wonderful players playing for some of the top European clubs, winners of Champions Leagues. They are top scorers in some of the European best leagues and so on. However, there has not been continued nor sustained nor even incidental success. There has been only one successful qualification campaign for the World Cup in Brazil in 2014. And as you said, success will breed interest, success will breed supporters. And there's been even, it's very difficult to measure it, but there are so many people who have been saying, had the Bosnian national football team been more successful on the field, then perhaps some of the divisions within Bosnia-Herzegovina, the political ones, would have been less pronounced, meaning that even some of the people who support Serbia and Croatia would have, had sympathies, maybe not openly supported Bosnia-Herzegovina, but certainly not rooted against Bosnia-Herzegovina, as is the case in somewhere. And this has all been made much more difficult by the parallel successes that the Serbian national team and particularly the Croatian football team have had in recent years. Croatia has been a regular member in the European and World Cups, and even played in the final in the last World Cup. So it's been very, very difficult to compete with that. On the other hand, each football match that has ended successfully, especially for Croatia or Serbia, is then followed by violence in various mixed urban communities where the supporters of the winning team, they wreak havoc in the cities and they celebrate. But then this is not a celebration in a nice and kind manner, but rather very unruly and hooligan-like. if we can say. So this has been quite a problem. The lack of success has also meant that Bosnia and Herzegovina has not managed to play an important role in European or world football as Croatia or Serbia have, for example, in the same period.
And if you, so Denver, that's kind of I mean, that's a bleak picture, and I think it's been for a very long time bleak as well for football in Northern Ireland. But then in the last decade or so, there are some really interesting developments that have somehow maybe separated positive celebration of the team from actual success, or it created another culture around it. How would you explain what happened in the last decade or so?
Well, I mean, I think it's a story that's been going on for the last 2 decades.
Okay.
There was a particular period of extreme violence in the early 2000s, or sorry, in the 1990s, and the just before the Troubles ended, and you know, the fan behaviour in certain nights in the 1990s and the early 2000s wasn't very, very good. So the IFA decided, you know, we've got to change this. And the way to change this is to actually go and talk to the supporters clubs and get the supporters clubs involved and actually changing the culture of the fans, getting them to decide what they want to do. For example, you know, there are certain colours that shouldn't be displayed. There's certain sectarian songs that shouldn't be sang, and getting the supporters clubs to actually police that at the games. And that's been extremely successful. Also, writing new songs like We're Not Brazil, We're Northern Ireland, and other songs. There was one particular time when we weren't actually scoring any goals, and they were singing songs like I Would Wait 500 Minutes, and the Proclaimers song, where they were waiting for a goal. And the whole fan vibe, even bringing in a little band to actually play along with the crowd. And then eventually that led to the Save Green initiative and the idea that you only wear your team colours at the match. And that was all. The IFA did that in conjunction with the fans. And I would say from about 2006 to 2016, whenever Northern Ireland qualified for the Euros, it's been very, very positive. And 2016 itself was the tournament when the Irish fans and the Northern Irish fans were at a tournament together. And it was actually quite a festival of, fans singing and enjoying themselves. And there was no incidents, obviously there was no incidents between the fans, and it actually quite celebrated in Northern Ireland. It seemed that we were turning a corner away from what it used to be like. But, I mean, there are still one or two incidents every now and again that that Northern Ireland is under the microscope in terms of behaviour. And anytime something happens, it's always kind of magnified massively because it seems as if it's back to the bad old days. But I can happily report I feel that things are definitely a lot better today.
So that's all football and the world of football and conflict and violence. But we are here historians also, history educators. Do both of you do you have any ideas about how this conflicted history and also conflicted, up to today, if there are is there a role for history to help move towards a more positive or less conflictual story around national football teams? And maybe national is even the wrong word here, but state level football or whatever the right word is. I know in Bosnia it's really a question of words and concepts before you get to something that you actually mean is of everybody, but or regional even, or whatever. But just what do you think from a point of view of using history to explain conflict or showing ways from football history? Just feel free to if you have any interesting ideas there.
What I would like just to say first is in Bosnia and Herzegovina, the issue of the football team, of the national football team, is an issue of identity. When people who in Bosnia and Herzegovina identify as Croats or as Serbs, it is very expected that they would identify also with the Serbian and Croatian national football teams. For them, it's quite a challenge to identify with the Bosnia and Herzegovina national team, and especially if it's less successful than their own football team. And furthermore, in Bosnia and Herzegovina, that has meant that the national team has always been seen by Serbs and Croats as something that belongs exclusively to Bosnian Muslims or Bosniaks. And that has been sort of a stigma that has been very, very difficult to shake off, because there have been uh, several examples of football players or Catholics identifying as Catholic Croats or as Orthodox Serbs playing for Bosnia and Herzegovina and identifying as their country being Bosnia and Herzegovina and their football team being the Bosnian and Herzegovina national football team. So this is something that perhaps should be an underlying topic of any conversation about football and history, because essentially football is about building, creating, and sustaining an identity, sustaining a relationship with other like-minded people who share an allegiance to something that you also share an allegiance with. And perhaps that would be the main buzzword, so to speak, identity through football. In the countries of former Yugoslavia, football has had such a pronounced role in the events leading up and during and throughout the breakup. There's even a very famous case when Zvonimir Boban, who is a famous AC Milan player for the Croatian national team, who played for the youth selections of Yugoslavia in a very heated match in Zagreb on the eve of the outbreak of the war. There were some demonstrations. Policemen were violent, and he jumped on the back of one Yugoslav policeman. So this was seen as the beginning or the symbolic beginning of the war, because people knew now that even in football is not immune to the political problems on the pitch. So the political problems have moved from the stands onto the pitch as well. And there are other various examples that can be illustrated for the purpose of signifying the significance of football for political developments. But then again, there are also very many examples of football being used to unite people and to play, where people of different creeds, different nationalities, different skin colors come together to play in other club football teams. And they do it very, very successfully. So this can be somehow translated also to the national sport on an international level. I think that these examples should be very carefully chosen and taught in football history teaching.
Thanks. Yeah, we actually put Zvonimir Boban also in our collection of life stories. But then I saw the other day there was also an interview with him, with an important economist. I forgot his name at the moment, and then he also spoke more about that, and they were kind of unpicking. It was kind of a nice multi-layered conversation. That yes, he grew up in a generation in Yugoslavia where they felt that they could not enough be Croats, whereas the economist with whom he was debating was 10 or 15 years older, who said he grew up in a generation that felt that Yugoslavia had given them everything. So even at the nuanced level of how did a person's identity shape in the second half of the 20th century, there's so much there to sort of go into then. But
sure, absolutely. And Zvonimir Boban is, just as an A-side, he's also a historian. So after he finished his career, he got a degree from Croatian studies in Zagreb, majoring in history. So he was someone who was very aware of his own role, but also of the more recent events in a political sense. He had a very pronounced national identity and a sense of Croatian identity, even within Yugoslavia. But I mean, there are so many examples. For instance, there's been a big topic in Bosnia and Herzegovina because one of the leading war criminals who had participated in the war activities in Bosnia was Arkan, who was a leader of the supporters of the Red Star Belgrade Football Club, who organized these young hooligans into paramilitary formations and then used them. So these are all negative aspects of football being used in a violent context, or people actually utilizing the violent aspects of football, hooliganism or football supporters, or these identity politics that football has to play in order to weaponize them in a very real sense. However, I believe that there are very many examples of football players being very altruistic, being very open with their colleagues of different nationalities, playing in different clubs in different ways, because
Yeah.
ultimately football is a universal sport or a universal language that these differences that we are now talking about in its essence. So when you strip it down to the bare basics, football is and can be enjoyed by everyone, regardless of who they are, where they live, what they think, what their political opinion is, and so on. So these examples should, I think, be the driving force in educating people for a better future, but not ignoring some of the negative aspects that people can use uh, this sectarianism, football sectarianism,
Yeah.
and combine political or religious sectarianism as well.
Denver, what would be examples that you would throw into a still to be written football history textbook for Europe?
I'm very interested in that previous answer, because I was going to say, really, football at its basic is a game to be enjoyed by all, and
Yeah.
really that's extremely important. But I mean, you've heard me talking about Irish history, and you've heard me talking about different incidents that happened, and I think I can drop in and out of that in relation to my lessons. But football gives us lessons on symbols, songs, colours, nationality, ethnicity, gender, sexuality, race, and different figures from the football community actually have things to say about that. I actually was playing with an idea, although I didn't have enough time, which is basically activism through football. Because I think with certain things that have happened recently, like Rashford and whatever, where football actually take a positive role in society, actually, that's a very, very good lesson to actually teach students. So, I teach both history and citizenship. So I would like to teach positive activism in citizenship. But obviously, we've got a load of brilliant examples from different people as part of Football Makes History that I can actually dip in and out of and use in different contexts depending on what I'm teaching. That's a really rich resource to be calling on, and the students will really enjoy hearing that.
I didn't pay you for that advertisement, just to disclaim. Okay, so I've taken a lot of time for you already. I want to just ask two more short questions. One of them is going to be who's going to win and why on Thursday. But before that, just so as I said in the beginning, this is an experiment to try to do this in this way, and I actually kind of like it. And I'm thinking, why don't I ask you to nominate two other people who I might then talk to in a month time or so on a maybe completely different topic, but within our, bigger community of history people. Uh, would there, does that spark any thought, that question?
Well, I think you need to talk to Ernie.
To Ernie. Okay. You don't know Ernie, Emir, but who would you nominate to talk? And maybe you can think of two people who would have to talk to each other, just like you did.
Sure, but I would nominate Igor Jovanovic. He's
Mhm.
someone that is a strong and pronounced passion for football, and is also, as far as I know, he's been very active in the.
Yeah, he's in our project. Yeah.
So he's someone who would definitely have something to say. I also know that Edin Radušić, a colleague of mine, is a very big football fan,
Mhm.
and he follows football very closely. And I think that also as a historian, he could give several of his own opinions about the way that football and history intertwine and interact.
Okay, nice one. That's a good thought. So, Denver, next coming Thursday, what's going to happen and why?
I mean, I have to say that despite our checkered record approaching this game, I have to say that Northern Ireland are going to scrape a 1-0 victory this Thursday.
Well, I can't respond to that any other way than by sort of trying already to make up excuses. The Bosnia-Herzegovina has had a spate of injuries in the recent weeks coming up to this game. But I also think that it'll be a very narrow 1-0 victory for Bosnia and Herzegovina. Hopefully, I think also let me just say that we need it more than Northern Ireland does. So.
Okay, and as a neutral host of this conversation, I'm going to say it's going to be an outrageous 5-5.
That would be the best. I would enjoy that. If you gave that to me, I'd sign up for it straight ahead.
Thanks a lot, guys, for this. I'm gonna wrap up and just hit the